Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of edtech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology who'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these edtech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to another bonus live episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, recorded here at ASU+GSV in sunny San Diego. We are here with members of the Huron team to talk about their recent Rise 40 report, as well as, I'm sure, many other things. But Kaitlin, if you want to kick us off and introduce yourself, we'll go down the line here. Just a little bit about your role and your background, and then we'll get in more about the report.
Sure. Thanks, Dustin. Thanks so much for having us. So, Kaitlin Dumont here. I am a director in Huron's student and academic strategy practice. I have been with the firm about 2 years. Before that, I was head of workforce at Kaplan, and then before that, working in the executive education space for a few different business schools. I'm excited to be here and talk about the research we've been doing into edtech, specifically edtech serving higher education in the student lifecycle space.
And I'm Peter Stokes. I'm a managing director at Huron, and I've been with the firm for a dozen years. And prior to joining Huron, I was at Northeastern University in Boston, served as vice president for global strategy.
Very good. And I guess just in case folks aren't aware, the elevator pitch of the work that Huron does, just to kind of capture it quickly before we move on.
So Huron is a global management consultancy founded in 2002, focused on healthcare and higher education, and we have the largest higher education consulting practice in the U.S.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think, from that vantage point, curating this Rise 40 report, we'll, include a link to in the episode description. I guess, that is part of, I'm sure what is bringing you all out here. You want to, kind of uplift that and talk about it, make connections with the folks that are featured in it. But just kind of your experience at the event. We're sort of midday on the second full day of the event. Any reflections, but just just kind of reflecting on your time at the event so far.
Sure. So this is my first ASU+GSV.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I'm a newbie. No stranger to knowing of the event, the ecosystem around the event. I've had several friends and colleagues attend previously who have prepared me wisely, perhaps a bit too much. I think we had 9 meetings yesterday. We have about half a dozen meetings today, but nothing beats having a meeting outside in sunny San Diego. Mm-hmm. And I know we'll talk a bit more about the report, but it is a cohort of 40 companies. And I think we've got to meet about a dozen of them in person. So
Awesome.
Nothing can compare to that. And we actually just saw 4 of them pitch in the GSV 50 Cup for higher education.
I would just add that, this event is unlike any other. And when you want to network, this is the place to come. Everybody you want to speak with is here. So it's fantastic.
Yeah. And that's the idea of whatever your organization is, if you're, selling into colleges and universities, or, looking to talk to your colleagues at those institutions, or, you partner with a bunch of other, edtech companies. Yeah, it's just cast a long shadow, the ASU+GSV Summit, and choosing your own adventure in terms of whatever it is that you're looking for, you'll probably find it here. And, a lot of people just kind of come into town, to kind of hang out. It's all just a really great community, and grateful to be here. And just for folks listening too, we're doing this one in the podcast zone. This is just a great opportunity to kind of have this space. But having this space here, we're going to talk a little bit more now about the Rise 40 research report that you all put out. And we can kind of just go back and forth between all of us here, talk about just the genesis of it, the origins of it, what's included, and then we'll talk more about kind of what you all are hoping for in terms of the impact of this report.
Sure. So I'm happy to kick off. So at Huron, we work with primarily colleges and universities, serving about 900 in any given year. Where we sit in the student and academic strategy practice, we work with vice presidents of enrollment, provosts, academic deans, and we've been hearing from them there's this little thing called AI. And they're getting an email pretty much every day from another vendor saying they can solve all of their problems with their AI-enabled solution. And they have about 30 minutes to sort through all of those and distinguish the signal from the noise. So they were asking us for our perspective and our point of view. And while we, had some insights anecdotally, we really set out to wrap our arms around the space, particularly the student strategy space across recruitment, retention, and career readiness. So RISE is actually an acronym for Re-Architecting the Integrated Student Experience. And it's about 6 months worth of research, both market scanning, leveraging AI, looking at different websites, press releases, of course, Crunchbase and some of the investor information, as well as primary interviews with about 25 edtechs and about a dozen university leaders. And after all of that, we put together sort of a 101 level primer for these are the 40 companies in that space that we think are doing really interesting work. And the hope is that it spawns a series of conversations on both sides of this marketplace between edtech and higher ed leaders. But I'm a little bit of a nerd, and my favorite piece is the appendix, where we include a series of critical questions, because the answer is there is no one edtech to rule them all. It's a very nuanced conversation based on institutional goals and priorities.
Agreed. I think that there are many institutions that are trying to view themselves as having an expert view on what's going on in the AI space, but they don't necessarily actually believe that themselves. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have folks, as Kaitlin was just suggesting, whose heads are spinning as they're being approached by all these companies. So this is, as Kaitlin says, really a chance to start a deeper conversation about the key categories and how you can create value and impact the lives of students. So that's what we're trying to help do.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I think that notion of there being a lot of noise, and even like, you might, if you're an institutional leader, like I've heard of some of these companies, but like I don't know exactly what they do. So even just like that is sometimes helpful to organize that information. But, I guess the impression I was getting, because I was seeing a lot of people on social, like kind of uplifting, like, hey, we're in this report and everything. Like, so I guess there is like a modicum, at least I guess the impression is sort of a brief follow-up on kind of the genesis of the report and what it includes, that there is like I guess like they're doing interesting work. Like you're putting a little bit of like maybe a stamp of approval, I guess, because it is maybe that idea of like part of the noise is that there's a lot of people doing, a lot of organizations doing very similar work. So I guess just any thoughts on that briefly following up of the idea of like you were doing all this. Was it important for you to maybe at least in some form or measure say like they're approaching this in maybe a specific, a novel or an important, a valuable way? So,
we are really watching a horse race. And I think every week there's a different horse in the lead. So the document really is meant to be an introduction. It's not the final word on anything. We're very interested in seeing how these companies evolve. And we're very interested in seeing how our university clients achieve success or don't achieve success utilizing these tools. We expect to continue this conversation. We expect to continue to follow these organizations. And we think in the context of the report, we've provided the appropriate caveats about what we are trying to say and what we are not trying to say. And so hopefully that's clear to everybody. But the fact that these companies feel like there's benefit in getting value, I think that's a good thing. And I think our clients value it as well, because at least there's someone who's done some scanning. So while there are 40 companies featured, we looked at over 120 companies to get to that list. So again, we're trying to be a thought partner with our clients so that they can become better informed about the space and make smarter decisions about where to work with.
Yeah, and I guess it's even that idea of like, you don't necessarily have a horse in the race kind of thing. It could be like, I could care less who you go with for X, Y, or Z, but like we at least want to try to help guide in terms of like, even like these are the functional areas that you should be considering when you're kind of developing your digital transformation strategy. Here's, a handful of ways that you could go about that. Because I even think, with my background, thinking a lot about like online education, sort of the, ups and downs of like OPMs and stuff. The idea that like sometimes it was where it's like, we want to just outsource everything, like do it all for us. But like, I think the pendulum was kind of swung the other way, like building internal capacity being important. That it's not like, we're going to sign this 30-year contract and, it's going to be very rigid or something. So like, it's even those kind of nuances of like, well, how do they partner? Or like, how do they sign their contracts? Or what, like what are their sort of suites of offerings? But, so I think, just the idea of trying to help those institutions make better informed decisions about who are they working with for what and how and, kind of the time horizon or, whatever it might be. Was there anything surprising in your analysis? I guess in this case, it might be like there was more companies than you thought that did something or less or, anything like that, I guess, of like anything that kind of stood out as I guess maybe not surprising, but just noteworthy maybe.
Yeah, I mean, not surprising in retrospect, but in just looking at the companies across those three pillars of recruitment, retention, and career readiness, recruitment had the highest number of new entrants and firms just coming into the space, where career readiness had a lot, mature isn't the right word, but established companies who have been in the space for a decade or more. And I think part of the reason for that is that it's easiest to demonstrate that quick ROI in the recruitment space in the period of one enrollment cycle, whereas career readiness is a bit of a longer tail to it, but still obviously critical to the conversation today.
Yeah, and even, just like that distinction, I guess, where it's like, like it's not inherently a bad thing if you're like, we've been around for 40 years doing this work, or, much younger, because, just the nature of like, the types of functional areas in higher education might be, better or less suited to companies that are like coming in as innovators and newcomers because they're like bringing something new versus like certain work that maybe is much more longitudinal, certainly like retention, persistence. Like, we're trying to get these students through for 4 years, perhaps. So we need to, be committed to this work and, for the long haul as a edtech organization or whatever it might be. So I think like, it's interesting for me because I think it is ways where like, I've heard a lot about this company, like the availability to get almost like an objective analysis of like, what do they do? Like, like all those sort of things, because obviously otherwise you're just going to like their website to hear them talk about themselves. And obviously they're changing the world and saving lives and, whatever. But
we are trying to put them in context with one another. Right. So it's not just about individual blades of grass. It's about trying to see the field. And as you say, one of the intentions is to help people understand the critical categories and subcategories, right? So we have these three areas that we're looking at, but beneath those, we look at a number of subcategories. So again, it's meant to be a kind of an entry point for folks who are trying to get their arms around this. We want everybody to develop expertise in these areas, but it's going to take time. And again, it is a horse race. Different folks are bringing new solutions to the market every day. And so you've got to keep your finger on the pulse. And that's what we're trying to help folks get started with.
Yeah. Just so there's not like apprehension or confusion. Like, just it, benefits everyone so that the marketplace just feels like a, place where, people are making more informed choices and, all of that. But
well, part of the hypothesis was that if we think about recruitment and retention, I mean, those are revenue drivers, right? Career is more of a value proposition driver. So it's sensible that folks are really focused on how do we improve recruitment? How do we improve retention? So we started with the hypothesis that these are areas where AI-enabled solutions are going to gain traction fastest. Now, we made a conscious decision not to look at the classroom space, not to look at the academic space where there's a lot of anxiety and hand-wringing and anger about academic integrity issues and so on and so forth. We think that's an important conversation, but that's a long and bumpy and slow conversation. This seems like an actionable conversation.
Would you, I guess, it's kind of a leading question because I admittedly know the answer. Would you then replicate that, like what's on the horizon, what's in the future in terms of, I mean, certainly just like how this could be utilized, but like, how do you see an effort like this moving forward to perhaps address teaching and learning as I think, the dust settles a bit? Because I mean, like we here, we've been recording a lot of episodes in the teaching and learning space, and there's a lot of novel approaches there where I think an effort like this could be helpful. So I'm just curious, like looking into the future, the impact of this report, and then what's next?
I think we absolutely should do the teaching and learning space.
Yep.
There's a lot of conversation, particularly about AI solutions in the space, as I'm sure you've had on numerous episodes of this podcast. But to be able to find the right tools that allow for helpful friction to really enhance the learning experience while still increasing access and equity, I think there is a role for AI to play. And who better than Huron to have that point of view? So perhaps that's the space we'll dive into next.
Yeah. Just a little teaser, coming soon, no commitment on time and all that. We always want to know what the sequel is, it's like, hey, this is great. Like, give me more. Look forward to that, hopefully coming soon. But, because I think it is, I will affirm though, what you're saying that I think like more dust needs to settle. Like it is like a very heightened kind of moment on the teaching and learning side. So I think, even
if I can give you one quick anecdote, I was out here in California a week or two ago speaking with the chair of the Faculty Senate, who told me that in the academic context, AI is an abomination and is destroying academic integrity and that there's no place for it. And when he finished with that statement, I said, well, do you use it in your own research? He's like, of course, I love it. It's amazing.
Right,
I've got this amazing personal assistant. And I'm like, well, have you
do as
thought
I say, not as I do.
Have you thought that perhaps your students might also benefit from an assistant like that? So we've got some ground to cover, and we want to see that ground covered, but we are, in a sense, trying to speak where people are ready to hear. And so just trying to choose the conversations that we feel we can contribute to.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it isn't even for me, like thinking back the past couple of years, like the way that I've kind of interfaced with AI as sort of this, ambiguous kind of existential thing. I've wanted to have people on, whether it's, folks from an institution or an edtech company that could speak to really tangible, specific, like, we're doing this is the impact that we're seeing, this is how we're kind of trying to iterate on it, versus it being like too conceptual around like, what does AI mean for teaching and learning? And we maybe just started something. I mean, it's too early to say whether it is achieving the goals that we have or something. So I think it's those sort of things of like the case studies, the proof points, and the receptiveness to having those conversations in a sort of kind of candid, earnest way of like, we're all trying to do a better job, be more effective, be more efficient. And like, AI is not the boogeyman unless you make it that or something, it could be kind of whatever you want it to be.
Well,
so
if there was any advice I would give to some of these early stage companies, it's to do that efficacy analysis, because we were just out at the tent listening to some of the pitches from the Cup 50 folks. Only one of them mentioned peer research on their outcomes. And obviously, if you're an early stage company, it's hard to have the outcomes if you've only been at it for a year or two. You have to go through some cycles. But it's an absolute imperative for these organizations to be able to show the performance improvements that their clients can expect. And of course, it can't just be the solution. It has to be how it's utilized as well. But I would just encourage all of these early stage companies to begin that work and to begin to prove that they can actually deliver.
Yeah, I feel like that is just sort of, a paradigm shift a little bit where like I think there's like resistance, or it wasn't seen maybe as like important and valuable, the idea of like having those like peer, research kind of things to kind of prove the efficacy of different tech tools. But I think that it's a good thing, like the scrutiny and all that, just sort of, the kind of being critical about, what the edtechs are doing, and are they achieving all these claims? And then even for institutions, obviously, like that idea that they're getting a lot of scrutiny from kind of the public and stuff of like, are you relevant? Are you sort of addressing kind of accessibility or affordability concerns? So I think it is like a climate that's kind of like just all around in all the different forms and shapes. So we'll see kind of where we go from there. But as we wrap up, we will ask the questions we're asking everybody here. I'm always just like to see where people take it. Start with you, Kaitlin. Advice that you would give to other higher ed leaders navigating this moment?
That's a good one. I would say don't be afraid to experiment. I feel like there's a lot of higher ed, rightfully so, that is all about being the expert in something. And there's a real fear sometimes of getting it wrong. In fact, a former university colleague a few years back said higher ed leadership would rather abdicate all responsibility than make a decision and get it wrong. Mm-hmm. But we're at a moment where the cost of inaction is just as high as doing something and having it be a little bit. So I would say experiment, start small, and then scale up quickly what's working. But this is a moment that calls for action, not inaction.
I would say it's important to recognize that AI is not all good and not all bad. And what we don't have enough research on is the extent to which certain students either have the disposition or don't have the disposition to benefit from these tools in a learning context. There's clearly plenty of anecdotal evidence that students can go down a rabbit hole with these tools and actually start to disengage, not work with classmates, not work with teachers, and get lost. There are certainly students who are outsourcing their education to the AI. That's not going to benefit them when they get to the labor market. But there are many, many other students who are using these tools to get things done. And we need our academic leaders to understand the difference between those populations and not treat them the same. So there's a lot for us to learn about how we benefit from these tools and how we put guardrails around these tools. It's early days, but I hope in a year we'll be in a better place.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you both for taking the time out, sharing all that you did, what ways to connect with each of you, and Huron and this Rise 40 report in the episode description. But just have a great rest of your event, guys, and pleasure talking to you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow.
So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.